Madam President, reserving the right to object, let me say that the resolution referred to by my friend from Illinois is comfortably residing in the Foreign Relations Committee at the present time and is subject to the regular order of Congress and of the committee. There's almost nothing that the senator said that I disagree with, although from time to time I do disagree with my good friend and colleague from Illinois. I think that this is a matter that is of most serious consequence to the United States of America today. And certainly the pursuit of a vaccine and or a cure are of utmost importance. I think that the process by which we go through that is incredibly important. Like Senator from Illinois, I am a huge fan of the NIH and, for that matter, the CDC, who do great things for the public health system in not only America, but in the world. They're vastly underappreciated. They're much like the electric switch in our rooms that every morning we get on and we get up and turn on the electricity and everything's fine. We just take it for granted and don't even think about it. And that's true of the NIH and the CDC. They do good work regardless of whether we're thinking about it or not. But in America, we have something more than just a government effort when it comes to public health. We have this great machine called the free market and free enterprise system that incentivizes Americans through the private sector, to do great and glorious things. Indeed, while my good friend from Illinois was bragging on the efforts by other countries to pursue the kinds of things that are needed, within the last 24 hours, we've had a very important announcement from part of our private sector who are making great strides in this regard. I think it's important that we do accept that there are various ways that we can and should pursue the vaccine and the cure for this horrible scourge. This matter is a lot deeper than that. It is the intent of our committee to hold hearings and develop very comprehensive legislation regarding how we pursue this in the future. What's just recently happened to us is of great interest to all of us, but not nearly as important as to what's going to happen to us in the future. The Senate Res 579, there are parts of it, if not the vast majority of it, that I hope will be included when we get to what hopefully will be a comprehensive piece of bipartisan legislation to address this. Some of the whereases I'm not too red hot about, but as far as the resolutions are concerned, certainly they state things that there would be unanimity, I think, in agreement. So where are we going with this? What my friend from Illinois has raised is a very small facet, an important facet, but a small facet of what we're going to do, what is the intent of our committee to do going forward in what I think will be a bipartisan fashion. And again, like I said, I hope that we're able to include these, and I welcome the Senator's participation and all members of the Senate's participation as the Foreign Relations Committee does move forward on some comprehensive legislation. But what do we know for sure right now? Well, I think Senator Durbin did an excellent job of taking us through history when it comes to some of the things we've had in the past, like smallpox, AIDS, polio, and Ebola. And certainly the United States has been a leader and will be a leader on this particular scourge. The WHO, and for that matter, other world organizations have been large players, important players, helpful players in those efforts in the past on smallpox, AIDS, polio, and Ebola. And again, I come back to, just as an example, polio. A huge factor in that was not the United States government. Well, they were a huge factor in it, but another huge player in that was a private citizens, a couple in the United States, Bill and Melinda Gates, who played a huge role in eradicating polio. working with the WHO, working with the USG, and many, many others. And I have no doubt as we go forward on this, there will be that type of collaboration in the future. As a good senator noted, this is not a political issue. This is not a Democrat issue. It is not a Republican issue. The virus doesn't care who you are or what you are. It's just looking for a home. And we need to deny it that home. And we will. And I think we will make great strides as we go forward. But what do we know for sure right now? What we know is that this particular virus evolved in China, particularly in Wuhan province, and specifically in a species of bat. What we also know is that there are about 2,000 so far identified viruses that are in the same position, that are carried by bats in the Wuhan province. What we also know is that a virus has escaped from China before. And there is a lot of speculation as to exactly how this happened. We know that the virus jumped species from the bat to a human being and then went around the world. We also know for a fact that this particular virus, like all viruses, act uniquely. It's not exactly the same as other viruses that have jumped species and gone around the world. And this one was unique in that, unlike some of the ones we've had in the past, and this is our sixth experience since 2003 with the virus, unlike those others, this moved around the world at incredibly fast speed. It was much more like a house on fire than the other diseases that we've talked about, like smallpox or polio. Its speed was unique. It was new. It was different. And as a result of that, historical organizations that have dealt with these in the past were not expecting it and were not geared for it. They thought that this virus would move much like the others that we've dealt with. And the result of that, of course, was that it got away from us, from the world, and we now find ourselves in the position we're in because that happened. It's my hope, and it is my objective, and hopefully will be the objective of our committee, eventually the objective of the United States Senate, and hopefully eventually the objective of the world, that we develop a protocol for dealing with a virus, or for that matter, any other health challenge that moves at the speed of light and like a house on fire, as opposed to a small creeping thing that we've had in the past and some of the other challenges that we've had. And it's different. There's no doubt it's different. And it's going to have to be dealt with differently, and going to have to be we're going to have to develop a protocol that does address this speed. And it's going to entail, and this is probably the heaviest lift of all of that we're going to do, it's going to entail governments, the 200 governments around the world, to come together and agree that when something like this happens in their country, instead of covering it up, or instead of making political excuses, or instead of hoping that it's going to go away, that instead they call the fire department. And the fire department will be a new agency, or perhaps even one of the old agencies that we've had that are geared to handle a pandemic that moves at this speed or presents other challenges. The institutions we have just simply aren't geared to do that, which we found out with this epidemic. The institutions dealt, I think, a good example is my good friend from Illinois mentioned, the Ebola challenge that we had. The historical institutions, I think, dealt quickly with that and really held down the damage from it, which could have been much, much more worse than what it was. We need to develop protocols for dealing with this. And this is going to be a challenge. There's no question it's going to be a challenge, because politics comes into this simply because governments in the various 200 countries around the world have to deal with this, and when they do deal with it, they have different ways of dealing with it. One of the challenges that we have here, as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, I deal with our diplomats who deal with the diplomats from other countries. We deal with them on the committee directly, but since this thing is hit, we haven't had as much direct contact. But our diplomats have continued to have contact. And one of the things that in talking with them, one of the things I find particularly disturbing is I ask, well, are the Chinese, are they humble about this? How are they dealing with this? What's their view of what's happened here? And interestingly enough, they take it as an opportunity to compare our form of government to their form of government. And they say, look, we had a problem, we dealt with it. You guys had the same problem, and you dealt with it, and you couldn't. And the reason is because we have this strong authoritarian central government that can control people and can control people in the most severe fashion, and we can deal with it. You people with all these freedoms in your democracies, you have speech, you have these political arguments, you have these disagreements, and you allow dissent. And when you have that, you can't deal with it. Therefore, our form of government is better than your form of government. That is very, very dangerous talk. And I'm disturbed and disappointed that the Chinese government have viewed this as they have, and have not viewed it as we have, as a challenge that is going to take historical changes as we go forward. That is a huge challenge as we go forward, but that shouldn't stop us from making every effort that we can to go forward. And we will. On the Foreign Relations Committee, it is our intent to hold hearings, to deliberate, as the U.S. Senate does, and to produce what hopefully will be a bipartisan piece of legislation, which is substantially broader than what we have here, but hopefully that will include many of the things that we have here, and that will include, as the good senator from Illinois has indicated, the necessity of including other governments in the effort as we go forward. And so I commit to you, Senator, and I commit to all that our committee will undertake this challenge. It is within the jurisdiction and the responsibility of our committee. We take it seriously. We're still in the throes of this, although it feels like we're on the downhill side and we're starting to come out of this. But as we go forward in a very common sense, deliberative fashion, we hope to construct legislation that will address all of these very serious issues. Because if there's one thing we know for sure, and I'm absolutely convinced of it, that this is going to happen again. Given the physical situations on the ground in Wuhan, China, given the fact that there are 2,000 other viruses, probably some of which are substantially worse than this, and for that matter, the same situation in other parts of the world, this is going to happen again, given the population of the world and given the population of, or given the culture, the way we live today in the world and our travel and interconnectedness. This is going to happen again. We need to be ready for it, and we need strong legislation that will address this, not only at the U.S. level, but also at the international level. The United States has been the world leader in world health issues, and I anticipate that we will continue to be like that. But at the present time, it is under consideration in our committee. So at the present time, we really can't go forward with this.
First, let me say to my friend and colleague from Idaho, thank you. The tone of your remarks was positive, constructive, bipartisan. That's exactly what the American people are looking for, at least in Illinois, and I'll bet you in Idaho as well. This national emergency, this public health crisis, should bring out the best in us, not the most political side of our nature. And thank you, because I think your remarks were offered in that respect. We've been here now 3 weeks. This is the third week since returning from a break where most of us were at home. I think this is the longest period of debate on the coronavirus that we've witnessed on the floor of the Senate in 3 weeks. I thought this 3-week period would be all about COVID-19, all about the vaccine. It hasn't. We've taken up many other things that had nothing to do with it. But what we've talked about here this morning is encouraging to me. And if bringing this resolution up with a unanimous consent request, is going to lead to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and other committees really moving forward on the important policy questions that you raised, and I hope I raised as well, then it was not time wasted. It was time well spent. And we do agree on so much more than we disagree. I'm sure of it when it comes to this. So I invite you, I encourage you, I beg you, as soon as we return from next week's recess, the sooner we can bring a hearing before your committee and others, the better.